Welcome to the OmniTalk Spotlight Series Grocery Shop Edition, sponsored by 1010 Data. You can't deliver on tomorrow's omnichannel demands with yesterday's insights. So why plan your business this way? 1010 Data empowers retailers and brands to drive more successful outcomes in today's demanding marketplace by leveraging alternative data and retail analytics solutions to identify and plan for what's next. Visit 1010data.com or arrange a meeting at Grocery Shop Spring Meetup for more information. Today, as part of our ongoing Spotlight series, we are pleased to bring you an exciting update on the future of in-store robotics with Badger Technologies and Ultraviolet Devices Incorporated, or as we like to call it here at OmniTalk, UVDI for short. Joining us are Tim Rowland, the CEO of Badger Technologies, and Peter Veloz, the CEO of UVDI. Tim and Peter, welcome to the program today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited. Tim, this is not our first rodeo. We've done this a few times. We've done it on stage at NRF. I think, gosh, when it was Retail X last year, we did some things too. And loyal listeners will remember, one of the first podcasts we did, which I think it was like January of 2020, right? Before the pandemic broke out.
Yeah.
It was a while ago now.
Yeah.
But maybe for those listening for the first time, talk a little bit about who you are and what Badger Technologies is.
Good. Thank you. And it's great to kind of have the band back together. So this
is.
And the quick version of Badger, a couple of us, a long history with IBM and Lexmark and several other companies that service the retail and grocery industry. And we started thinking about ways to help grocers kind of know what's going on in the store, specifically grocery and other retailers. And began a project that culminated in a small startup. And this is one of those classic deals of starting in a basement with 12 engineers trying to figure out what to do. And we had a lot of good feedback from some early customers that we asked the question, if you could look into your stores, what would you like to look at? What would you like to know about? And so we kind of adopted this deal of providing visibility into these store locations. And at the time, a lot of good things were happening in computer vision and, self-driving cars and LiDAR and all the cool stuff you want to put on your resume. And the technology just kind of culminated in robots running around stores, looking at shelf conditions and floor safety. And, the company started to get some momentum. And we had a parent company at the time, Jabil, that actually acquired us. The team's grown to about 100 of us now. And, clicking along pretty good, got a couple key customers. But again, hold true to that vision. How can we help you look into your stores?
And Peter, what about you? Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I'm the third generation business owner of UVDI, which long form is Ultraviolet Devices Incorporated. And we are, as the name implies, all about UV disinfection. I don't know in this space how many people would be familiar with UVC, but it is a...
Assume not many, Peter. Yeah,
yes.
let's hit this well. Yeah.
Safe, yeah. It's getting more attention. It's become a bit of a hot category because it's a disinfectant, right? So you think COVID, how do we remove it? You need a disinfectant. And so this disinfectant's done through a light wave. So 254 nanometer light wave is produced from these specialty lamps. And when a pathogen sees that UV light, it disrupts its DNA. It stops it from being able to replicate. So we use the term killing it, but that's a simplistic term for we really are inactivating it.
Okay.
And so now you've got this powerful light-based disinfectant that's chemical-free and can cover a broad area if it's applied properly, right? So we go back 3 generations. My grandfather started the business in the late 40s, trying to commercialize UVC, one of the pioneers. And he really focused on water disinfection. A lot of the cities around the world use UV as their primary source of water disinfection, moving away from chemical. And then we started focusing about 20 years ago, trying to go additionally to HVAC, right? So now let's go up into the air system.
Okay.
So we've got built-in occupants. Can we disinfect the airstream? Can we bring a big value there? And then about 10 years ago, we braved a path into surface disinfection, right? So now we're going to be in a room on a mobile robotic platform. It's not autonomous, but it's mobile. And we're going to go into hospitals.
Okay.
So now we're going to go into an operating room, a patient room. So Chris, if you have the misfortune of having an infection in the hospital,
right,
they treated you and you got discharged, The next person, if Tim's coming into your room, they have a 200% more likely chance of acquiring the infection that you left the hospital with, even when they clean the room.
Why is that?
Because the nature of cleaning a room with chemicals, these guys, the cleaning services hospitals, they are like frontline workers, right? They've got my undying respect. These guys are amazing, guys and girls. But if you get in there and I need to wet down every surface in a room with a chemical, and I need a wet contact time, you're just not going to get everywhere. So there was this really powerful study a few years ago that showed even under best conditions, we only get half of the bad bugs out of a hospital room when it's being terminally cleaned between one infectious patient and then the next patient, right? We come in at step 2, not to disrupt that workflow, but just be an additive cleaner.
Okay.
And we can get that 50% level all the way up to 99 and greater, right? Within just a few minutes. So there's a real value add of UV disinfection for surfaces. And those have been kind of our 2 lanes, were HVAC for indoor air quality and then healthcare. And, you know, we've had a lot of success in them. We become, you know, pretty much an industry leader in especially in the healthcare and HVAC industries. And so when Tim came to us last year with this idea of maybe considering a new vertical, a new space, we thought, there might be something really to this, right?
Might be something there. Okay, well, let's get to that. And so to do that, let's go back to Tim a second. I want to back up a little bit too, and make sure, because I want to hear how that genesis started. So I think to do that right, Tim, you've had a few, we've talked about this before in the program, but you've had some large scale implementations at Stop and Shop and Giant. Take the audience through, if you will, like how those started, where those have been, and then how things have evolved, and how you and Peter came to have this kind of meeting of the minds that there's something to this whole thing.
Perfect. So, you know, I mentioned just trying to stay tight with the customer demand. You know, I don't like undirected engineering, right? Let's find a real, solvable problem that can help the retailer. So, you know, Ahold came to us and said it's floor inspection. So you guys are going to smell the theme here, but it's safety in the environment and in the form of trip and slip hazards that we can detect from the floors. And so we solved that problem, if you will, and they rolled us out to the 2 brands you mentioned, Stop and Shop and the Giant Company. That's 500 and some robots that have been running around doing their thing, really 10 hours a day for 2 years. So
is that how long it is now? 2 years?
Yeah, and I love the stat now. We've made it to the moon and back as far as miles logged by a robot. So I don't know, just kind of fun to think about.
Oh, that's good.
So,
I might use that.
That's amazing.
So you solve the problem of, you know, floor safety. And then, you know, the first reason we were asked to, you know, first thing we were asked to go solve was shelf conditions. Well, we solved the floor thing, and then we focused on, hey, let's look at the shelves, look for out of stock, price mismatches. Well, maybe the display's not set up the way it should, and provide that feedback. Well, you know, quickly you're seeing, okay, this notion of a dual purpose robot, you know, what else can this thing do in the store? And, you know, we kind of branched out. So now it's the natural progression. You know, some of our customers are doing one thing, they're doing 2 things. Well, now what else can I do with this navigation base? Peter mentioned the notion of autonomous. Well, we kind of solved the autonomous thing. This thing can run around, it can navigate around people and structures and, you know, stay inside and all that kind of stuff. Well, the natural progression is what else can I do with this mechanism? And, you know, we kind of searched the world and landed on, we think, the best in the industry. It's UVDI. So, you know, this notion of disinfecting is not going to go away. You know, the pandemic hit us like, you know, turned the world upside down, but we're all now sensitive to these surfaces have to be cleansed, and where else but retail, right? I mean, it's the collection of all the humans in a small place. We've got to do something.
Right.
Well, Tim, tell us a little bit about how it works. I mean, I know that the shelf scanning robots are usually running alongside the aisles. Is it that same kind of plan, or are there other spaces that this is getting into?
Yeah. So I think that's the starting point. You know, the level of the technology at this point, these lights, when they're on, we don't want any people around. You know, this is very high intensity lights that right now, you know, they need to be run in a dark store. You know, so after the store closes, Our robot would come out. There's lights on at least two sides now. We'll probably have them all the way around here in the near future. And it's running up and down the pathway that the humans would do. And we get close to the surfaces or go through the checkout register or get near the cart corral. But any of these surfaces that are exposed to these pathogens, we're going to kind of blast them with these lights. And it'll run for several hours and cover the whole store. Go charge some batteries, maybe do it again if needed.
Nice. I want to talk more about that, but okay, hold on. But back up for a second though, because I do want to understand, how did this meeting of the minds happen? Like, are you guys like did you guys go out and search and find Peter? Were you guys at like a club together and you just started talking about this like two engineering kind of nerds would do? Like, how did that happen first?
Well, Peter, you're going to tell your side too. So it wasn't technology eHarmony. We didn't do anything like that. But, the part was we were looking for experts, so I hope it's a sober approach when we knew what we were good at. What we were not good at or experienced at was the science. So we need somebody that had the science and the experience, knew how to navigate through certifications and health concerns and all that. And again, we went down the list. There weren't many. And then we kind of interviewed the various groups. And two things happened with UVDI and Peter and his team. It was a match technology-wise. They had the science, they had the experience, they had expertise and the track record, but they also had the culture that matched. And anytime you're going to join forces, you better work culturally together. And even though these guys live in California, we can deal with them. So I'd say, we've had a great time getting to know each other, and it just connects. Be very transparent. What can you do? What can we do? What's the right answer? Let's focus on the customer.
And Peter, what was your impression when Tim comes and asks you, hey, I'm thinking about doing that. We're hearing this, this might be a need out in the marketplace. What were your first thoughts as he came?
I thought it was really exciting and really interesting at first. We've been looking at robotic and autonomous UV disinfection, and we think it's a really emerging space right now. It's actually getting a lot of attention, a lot of entrants, some big, a lot of small. And so as we stared at it, I always looked at it a little bit like the EV market for all the electrified cars, right? It's super exciting. I'm a big fan. Everyone's trying to perfect the car right now. But what you really need, if you don't have a mature charging network, you're gonna have a lot more frustration than success, right? And so when we were looking at partnering with robotics companies, in my mind, I was always thinking, but what about not the charging network, but the monitoring, the support, the service? Who's actually doing this? To go from a VinCap startup-based sort of experiment, that's fine. You may even get an okay device, but how is it going to work globally, be maintained, monitored, and supported, right? All the software, all the engine behind it. And when we learned, and I did some fast and furious, Google searching and realized that Badger and Jabil had this great track record of 500 deployments, monitoring these devices globally. All of a sudden, really, the lights turned from yellow to green in my mind. Like this is where we sort of get that 1 + 1 = 3, because we're taking two already industry-leading aspects and combining them, and we're sort of the first ones to do that, right? So I think they called us in the middle of this thing, sort of, I forget what month it was, March or at some point, and we just sort of did that. Do we fit, right? Is there that cultural connection? We're never going to meet physically, but we're going to engineer something extremely brave, and it's just been a total blast. And I think I echo Tim's words, it's been really successful. Culturally, our engineers all speak sort of on the same sheet of music pretty naturally, and we think we're just getting started. It's going to go really well.
Peter, I think it's so smart too, from the customer side of this, just understanding your background, having done this in hospitals and then taking this into, food safety. I'm curious, Tim, what's the response been from customers of the Stop and Shop and Giant locations from just having this as an added security and safety measure for them?
Yeah, I think the first word I would give is intrigued. I think the world was turned upside down. What do I do? And, retailers scrambled, grocery stores. I mean, how am I going to handle this? I've got a a very nervous customer base. I've got governmental regulations at the local level and state level. So this intrigue is, wow, this could be something big, is kind of the reaction we're getting. So
Sure.
and dipping their toe in the water, come let us test a few things. How would this really work in my environment? That's the mode we're in, and that's why we want to kind of get the word out there, because we're in uncharted territory, really, right? I mean, that's been the watchword for 2020. So how are we going to solve this together? What's the partnership? UVDI and Badger are partnered, but honestly, we're going to partner with our customers. And what level of cleansing do you want? Do you want us doing back rooms? Do you want us doing buggy areas and floral departments? Let's find the right balance that gives you the ability to message to your customers, come shop where it's safer. And you don't have to worry while you're here, because we're doing due diligence. And, I'm very encouraged by that, because, in a crisis, what do we do best, right? We band together and try to solve the problem. So I feel like, in a way, that's what we're doing with our multiple customers.
That's fantastic. And how do you think that this is going to kind of play out for the rest of the year? This has obviously been well received, but what does that mean in terms of how you two might continue to partner together throughout the rest of 2021?
Yeah. So, right ahead of us, we're going to be doing a test in a local store. One of these what would you say, early adopters or, technology experimenters are saying, hey, bring this thing in here. I know this will solve some of my problems. So we'll be in testing right away. I imagine, a couple pilots later in the year. I'm really hoping we're going to see something live in production, within a 12 to 18 month period, where we've got, ways to learn. And again, we'll evolve from that and learn, how effective is it? How long can we do this every night? Where else would we want to do this? Again, I'm encouraged by, or at least excited about. We don't know what the future of this is going to look like, but we're on to something here. So,
and I think it reminds me a little bit of the hospital startup, the hospital path that we went down. In the beginning, it was a lot of skepticism. It was a lot of, that sounds interesting. It was a few outliers that would adopt. But what we did is we kept trying to bring the audience, the hospital, which are the scientists, the epidemiologists, the IPs, the infection preventionists, bringing them more and more proof, right? So we would bring them third-party accredited validation from the top labs. And then we had several leading hospitals do, year-long or 2-year-long studies to prove that we could actually reduce their infection rate as a hospital attributable to this device. And then they would publish those in the leading journals, right? So we went from a good idea to a lot of proof to convincing gold standard proof. And now 10 years later, we're in 1,100 hospitals around in 25 countries, about 2,200 of our robots are being deployed. There's a lot of other companies also being successful. And it's become a little bit of a standard of care, a little bit of a pretty common practice in a relatively short amount of time. I don't think it's exactly the same in retail, but we're going to go from it's a good idea. We're going to do further study. UVDI is going to help bring, some really good proof and research from laboratory kind of data perspectives. And I think then we get those testimonials going, right? You start finding out that, I love all the retail places where I go and my family goes, but I leave every time, I'm conditioned. I don't touch anything. My hands go straight to the alcohol, because I know we've been a really shared environment, like more intensive than anywhere else in my neighborhood.
Right.
And if I had that guarantee that they're sort of starting their business day fresh every day with a clean environment, right? That it's really been sanitized in a way that's unique and value add. I think there's a lot of road in front of us for this.
Yeah, Peter. I mean, I think that's a really compelling point. I'm glad you brought that up, because my mind was going there anyway, based on what you and Tim had been saying. I mean, you brought up the point before about, which I just want to reiterate, because I think it's important, about, wanting to work with Badger Technologies and Jabil just because of the history and the ability to service product throughout the world, in a very confident way, which I think is a part that often gets lost in the whole startup and technology discussion.
Right.
And so I think the other thing that was interesting, what you said, that I'd love to get your further thoughts on, is you talked about the history at hospitals. Like, what are things that maybe retail executives listening to this interview right now, from your experience, could learn from the experience of the hospital executives as they were going through that 10-year process? Like, what are things that retail executives should be doing if they're interested in this idea to bring it about successfully? Like, what's the right mindset and approach?
Yeah, I think we found, they really had to be in touch with, is there in an evidence-based world of healthcare, right?
Okay.
To be past that gate. So there is that gate, but then it really came down to, how adoptable is it? How much can this actually integrate into the workflow of an extremely busy, at times almost chaotic hospital, right? You imagine what we've even been hearing about this last year. Well, it's generally always a little chaotic in a hospital. They're busy. Things need to turn on a dime. There's no time to add anything that's not extraordinarily value added. It goes out, right? There's no justifying it. And so I think the adoption level of it's easy. In our sense, we're in the middle of the night. Tim talked about a dark store. It doesn't have to be lights down dark. It needs to be emptied out, right? And we'll carry sensors on our device that will stop it from working in the presence of people, because UVC has got to be operated in the absence of people. Okay. And so I think it's follow the evidence. How easy is it to adopt? And then gauging, it's amazing how many customers now in hospitals will not go into a hospital if they're not guaranteed it's been UV disinfected. People come in asking for it. When my mom was recently in the ICU and was sick, they use our devices at our local hospital. For every discharge from every ICU, no patient goes in without that room being really, really powerfully cleaned, right? With this automated disinfection. And I wouldn't have wanted my mom in there without it, right? So there is, when the executives start realizing that they're at some point, when people realize what you're offering, there's going to be a pull for it. I really believe there will be sort of a little bit of a groundswell of enthusiasm or determination. If you can clean my store that deeply, why wouldn't you, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a different path, but I think there's going to be some similarities to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially when it's something that you can add on to an existing mechanism that's already going through the store. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the two of you coming together, is that it's just enhancing the capabilities of something that the retailers have already invested in and are seeing a return on that investment from.
Yeah, and that's actually the question. Maybe we close on that, I think, too. And maybe Tim, maybe you bring us home on this one, but put this in context with the other implementations you've done, because I think, in past conversations we've talked about, say floor monitoring, right? Like, that's a job that just probably wasn't getting done to the degree that it needed to get done. And so robots are a natural fit there. But the topic that always comes up too is the kind of the human side of the robot implementation. That must be a different context here too, because that's not a job that people necessarily want to do when you're talking about disinfecting a store. Place that in the proper context. How should we think about that?
Yeah, I've heard one author write, where's the best spot for automation in retail? And, he rattles off what he calls the 4 Ds, doing the difficult task, the dull one, the dangerous one, what's the other one? The dirty one, right? That's where it fits, where here we are, right? I mean, this is somewhere between dangerous and, dull, but, this is where automation makes sense. You don't really want a human around here for safety reasons. Most of the time to do this, you'd be in a hazmat suit or something, spraying things. You want it done consistently. I mean, to do the alternative, it's very expensive. And to imagine you can go from that once a quarter to doing this thing every night. And wouldn't you love to have a sticker on your front door, disinfected, like the hotel guys are doing for your room? I mean, it just seems like such a perfect spot. And, yeah, we're certainly not displacing any labor. We're just taking something they could not do and allowing them to do it on a consistent basis. And just then imagine, we're going to be collecting data as well. How well was this disinfected? Did this area get touched? Again, just a perfect spot for an automaton to collect data, right? And and give some confidence to the retailer they pass on to their customers.
Yeah, right. You can watch this over time. That's interesting. Yeah, so basically what you're saying, it's a dirty job and somebody's got to do it, and
Yeah.
why not it be a robot? Which,
Yeah.
hey, that's what we do on this show. It's a dirty job, but we try to get to the root of technology that matters in the future of retail, and this is
Absolutely.
definitely that. Well, hey, fascinating discussion. I think there's a lot of meat on these bones, and this is going to be really interesting to watch as the pandemic plays out, the rest of the year plays out. If people want to learn more about it or talk to you guys more about it, like what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, for us, hit our website, info@Badger Technologies, and we'll respond right away and follow up on any questions.
And for us, it's UVDI.com is a one-stop shop for, you learn about it. We do a lot of education, obviously a lot of value add on being able to contact us appropriately for HVAC, all the indoor air quality stuff, which is removing COVID from the airstream is a concern, as well as all of the healthcare and now retail space. Yeah, so.
That's great. Now, I learned a ton, Peter, especially thanks to you. The first time talking to you, Tim, always a pleasure. I know we always love, sitting down with you too, but yeah, learned a ton from this discussion too, which is a core reason why we do this show. So thanks again, gentlemen. Again, Tim Rowland, CEO of Badger Technologies, and Peter Veloz, the CEO of UVDI. To everyone listening out there, it's never more important than it is right now. Be careful out there.